So there's two things I think we can all agree on. Nobody likes goody two-shoes, and nobody likes that person who thinks they are better than everyone else. After the US elections, I posted something on Facebook that I didn't think it was controversial. I just thought it was funny. And, of course, some people got really angry. Some people got it. Most people got it, particularly if they voted a particular way. Other people who voted another way, let's just say, most of them didn't like it. Some of them got it. But, the reason why I posted it was because it was the general sentiment in my neighborhood, at least. The day before I had posted that, after Barack Obama won, there was this really positive air, except for the one cross burning in my old neighborhood in New Jersey. There was this, sentiment of like, wow, let's be good to each other. Let's be friends. Everybody was really happy. And then this time around, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of crying. There's a lot of need for uplifting. A lot of my friends of all ethnic persuasions, even my German friends. Actually, some of my German friends were the most vocal in terms of being horrified that this could make somebody popular to, advance bigotry in the way that we've seen in this past election. And so, so I posted this meme, and it was politically incorrect, but it was freaking funny. It was just funny. I mean, I would have posted, I don't care who won. I would have posted the equivalent if Hillary Clinton won. But I was totally detached from it. Anyway, so this woman comes in on the thread and she starts telling me how I'm the problem. You're just causing more problems. You're making people really upset. Just really whiny stuff. So I go to her Facebook page, which I, never look at because it's usually pretty vapid content. And it's still vapid content. I look back several weeks of her posts and they're all just nonsense. I shouldn't say nonsense, but they're, a lot of this like law of attraction, fake stuff, the kind of stuff that glazes over the fact that we do actually have problems in society and we have things that need addressing. And I think this is a huge problem that we're experiencing, not just, spiritually, but in terms of nutrition. Like everybody just wants to sweep under the rug what they don't want to see. Personally, I don't think that's what the law of attraction is about. I don't think that's what love is about. I don't think, that's what the human experience is about. There's going to be ugly things that we have to deal with or express. And a good friend of mine who actually voted for Trump sent me a video of John Cleese where he basically says, look, if, good comedy makes you uncomfortable, which is what I was trying to tell this woman. But he also says that when someone is not comfortable expressing their emotion, they try to change others. And that's exactly what she was trying to do. She was trying to change me because you look at her page and you see there's no emotion there. It's just, I'm just going to post all this stuff that feels good and it's going to make me, really spiritual. And this was really apropos because the week before I had just interviewed JP Sears, who is the guest you're going to hear today on the show. JP Sears, of course, is renowned for his viral videos on being ultra spiritual. I love this guy. He is so down to earth, so wonderful to speak to. And I got to speak to the real him. So you guys get to listen in on that. Thank you for being here on the Nutrition Heretic Podcast. Meet Gina. Gina wanted to lose weight, so she spent 2 years fasting, detoxing, and dabbling with vegan diets while practicing a shit ton of yoga to lose 25 pounds. But it took so long that nobody noticed. Then, Gina started Frenching her food by eating fatty cheeses, butter, sausages, and red meat, and lost 15 more pounds in only 2 months. Everybody noticed this time. Frenching your food unlocks the riddle of weight loss that skinny French chicks use to slim down, look young, and live longer despite doing everything wrong. Be like Gina. Start Frenching your food today by visiting nutritionheretic.com/Frenching.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder. It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being. All right, so today on the show, I have someone that we all know and love. I stumbled across him, I guess it was a little over a year ago. As a matter of fact, it was when I was moving into the house where I live now, and somebody said, you gotta watch this video on gluten intolerance, and I was immediately in love with my kindred spirit here. Today we have JP Sears from awakenwithjp.com, and you may know him as your ultra spiritual guru. And what is the title that you like to use, JP?
It's a good question. Depends on what part of me you're talking to. First off, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me on, Adrian. And yeah, I think the part of me answering the question right now, I'd say like delusional redhead is probably about the most accurate title. I think the character part of me likes, his enlightenedness, ultra spiritual JP.
Okay, that sounds good. His enlightenedness. And we might see his enlightenedness during this because the spirit kind of takes you over, right?
Yeah, and sometimes he's so omnipresent that he's there, but we don't see him. So sometimes you have to look for what you can't see, and maybe he's already there.
Okay, so what I really want to know, because I really do feel that you're my kindred spirit, because what I have identified over the years is this people striving to be perfect in every area of their lives. I have always attributed it to the decline of popularity in Western religion, namely, Catholicism, Christianity, if you will. I mean, we've definitely got our fundamentalist end of it. But there's very few people in the middle who are really committed to saying like, yes, Jesus walked the earth and whatever. So the way I've always seen it is that there's kind of this decline in conventional, traditional religion, and people are looking to replace that with something. I think this is part of human nature. In some cases, people have gone to Eastern religions, and they, at least in their Western mentality, feel that there's a certain set of tenets or behaviors that have to go along with that. And sometimes it just involves talking like this and very, just sounding like you're bringing peace into the room. By the way, I know someone who brings nothing but anxiety to a room when she talks like that. and I'm not even going to go any further. Let me just say, when everybody I meet has a story about you, you're not that, and it's not a flattering story. You're probably not attaining the goal that you want. But we're also seeing this with the way people eat. And you touch on that in so many of your videos, the person who's looking for their spiritual perfection through food.
Yeah.
What was your take, and what was kind of the breaking point for you where you're like, enough is enough. We have to really start to analyze where we're headed. At least this is the way I perceive your work, where we're headed with this kind of layer of spirituality that we're using to suppress the feelings underneath.
Yeah, I think my breaking point, is probably a gradual thing. It wasn't any kind of moment of aha, but maybe like boiling water. I mean, there is a point where now it's boiling, but it took a while to get to that temperature. And I think it was mostly how I got to my breaking point of now, sharing my ultra spiritual perspectives, shining the light on whatever it shines the light on, is looking at my life, the path I was taking to find myself in a compassionate way. The more I looked at it, the more I saw that at times it was also a path I was self-righteously losing myself on. So, and I love what you said about going from religion to spirituality, and sometimes for people that's a genuine step forward, whatever direction forward is. For other people, it's a step to the side that they tell themselves is forward. So it's kind of like applying the same patterns of thinking, the same dogma, just in a new environment. but thinking that we're different, but our eyes are just looking at something new, and we're using new words. So it's just kind of like, I've been through a lot of relationships in my day with women, and I've had so many experiences where it's like, oh, this relationship, it's getting old, and here's what's wrong with it. So I better leave the relationship. Then the next partner I have, it's the same damn relationship, just a different person, because apparently wherever I go, there I am. So, whatever spirituality, religion, nutrition we go to, there we will be as well. So I do find it's something I'm self-righteous about. I'm passionate for the sense of helping myself, but also hopefully helping other people help themselves. See the noble looking hiding places that we as humans hide our judgments and intolerances. I think there's two types of people in this world: those who are humans, and then those who deny the fact that they too are a human being. And it's very human for us to have judgments, very human of us to have intolerances. I think ultimately it all folds back to be how parts of us feel about us. Mm-hmm. Then we can project that onto other people, but I think ultimately that's all a relationship we have with ourselves. So nonetheless, here we are, humans, lots of judgments, lots of intolerances, and at least I feel a level of inherent shame about those things. So I don't like to expose them. So guess what I do? I hide them in hiding places that are not only hidden, but they look beautiful. They look noble, not scummy and judgmental, but noble.
And so enlightened, of course.
Absolutely. So I think some of those altruistic, noble-looking hiding places that myself and a lot of us have adopted without knowing their hiding places would be spirituality, self-growth, improvement, religion, nutrition philosophies, all things that when we see groups of people like, oh, they're self-righteous, those vegans are bad people. It's like, no, that's not veganism. That's judgment and intolerance. They might call themselves a vegan, but that's not veganism.
Right.
So I do feel passionate about shining the light in the shadows where we hide pieces of our own psychological self. Underneath our judgments and intolerances are parts of us that are hurt. They're afraid. They're ashamed. They feel horrible about themselves. And those parts of us, I think, need connection with the rest of us. They need connection with the mothership of our own self. But the more we hide those judgments, the more we hide the pain underneath them, which is the more we hide the part of us that holds the pain. So I think the idea of becoming more transparent and vulnerable with our judgments instead of hiding them is really ultimately all about connecting back to ourselves.
And the one thing actually I have to interject here and say is that atheists or agnostics, whatever you're calling yourselves these days, you're not off the hook, because what I have seen is that people are turning atheism into the new religion.
Absolutely. It's another same pattern, just a different environment.
Right. And so sure. It's just a different label for the same thing. And I'm going to, call him out. Ricky Gervais has built his empire around being an atheist. And, he can't wait to talk about it. Every, stand up movie, whatever he does. But he is nonetheless proselytizing as much as the Jehovah's Witness that knocked on my door the other day. Yeah. So, I think we sometimes delude ourselves into thinking that we've moved beyond, a certain attachment, to, what we consider our place in the world and, what our duties are to one another, et cetera, how close we are or are not to, a God or some other, spiritual, entity that we revere. And some people just end up right back in that box. So.
I mean, one of the messages I'm hearing your wisdom is, the old saying that we all have heard more times than we can count, and we all need to hear it more times than we can count, which is what we don't like about other people is truly what we don't like about ourselves. What we like about other people is what we actually like about ourselves. And I can't prove that that's true. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody can. But to me, it just feels beneficial to pretend for a second that that's true. What would that mean about our life? Would it mean we're taking more responsibility for how we experience ourselves, other people, and our world? Or does it mean we're giving our responsibility away in blaming our irritations, our anger, and our fear on other people or the outer world? Or can we take responsibility? So I asked that kind of a rhetorical question, but of course my answer is, that actually pretending that what I don't like about other people is what I don't like about myself. It makes me feel like I have more responsibility. And there's a part of me delusional enough to believe that more personal responsibility for me, not other people, but for me, that feels empowering.
Right.
It really does.
Right, right. And for me, you don't know this about me. I'm a linguist, so I speak a few languages. I've studied, and
That's awesome. I barely speak one language.
No,
So
you're wonderful at it. But I can go to Italy and just like put on some books on tape and then go there and actually converse with people. But what I notice is how our language it really shapes the way we think, and it really kind of underlies a lot of our personality in many ways. And I think the hardest thing for an American learning a foreign language is that we've dumbed down our language to a lot of sound bites. When I was in like 7th or 8th grade, I remember my French teacher telling me, well, you should know what that word means. We have the same word in English. We were like, we don't know because we didn't know our own vocabulary. Where I'm going with this is that I think too often, and I see this definitely in nutritional circles, people get hung up on, is this a good food? Oh, that's bad for you. And so, sometimes we need to move beyond those labels of good, bad, right, wrong. And, is it salty? Is it flavorful? Is it bland? Is it, does it give me a stomach ache? Like those are the questions, or the Eckhart Tolle would say that, words only point to the truth. They are not the truth, right? So, if that food does something specific for you, then yes, that's acceptable. But to place that judgment of just good and bad and right and wrong really strips it of all its potential things that it can bring to you or not bring to you, or for someone else. That's another thing, is that this is much of this can be subjective, but we get too caught up in again, the perfection, right and wrong. Yeah. And that's not always the case. We have this glorious language with a multitude of adjectives to describe things, and we've chosen 4 as, as the basis for everything, so we can just see everything as black and white. Yeah.
To me, I love that perspective. To me, the propensity to try to dumb things down, is this right or is this wrong? To me, it means we're going after a sense of certainty instead of allowing things to be beautifully ambiguous, allowing there to be possibilities. Instead, we impose limitations and a sense of certainty. And I think a simultaneous caveat to that is we don't have to think. Tell me, is this right or wrong? Is this good or bad?
Absolutely.
And there's so much space in between, as you were mentioning. And I think that's where the beauty is. There's a wonderful friend and teacher of mine where if you ask him a question like, is this good or bad? He'll say yes. And sometimes it's the most irritating thing, but I think it's the most empowering answer. Like, it's potentially both. It's like, what meaning do you have to assign to that in this moment? It's kind of like, is this food good for me or not? It's like, well, what's your biochemistry doing? What day is it? Have you worked out today? And your answer might be different next week. So I think one of the things the human ego does the most is try to avoid mystery. And I think one of the things our spirit, and it's just probably my ego thinking, so take it with a grain of salt, but my ego thinks one of the things our spirit does is wants to explore mystery. There's a quote that I love. I forget who said it and when they said it. Doesn't even matter. But the quote is, life is a mystery to be experienced. It's not a problem to be solved. It's not a question to be answered. Life is a mystery to be experienced. And what I'm hearing with your wisdom is when we you as a linguist know that language has the potential to take us out of the zone of our familiar and explore. And language also, if depending on how we use it, has the potential to be a confining, limiting force if we use it in a limiting way.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, well, I don't want to get into politics right now.
Nobody ever gets about politics, Adrian, do they?
But there's when this is what appeals to a lot of people with certain candidates, surprising candidates, is that they like to, if we can. I mean, this is the rise of the Third Reich. We can put all these people into a box and blame them for all of our social ills. And one of the I don't know if it's a bit or what, but that I talk about on the show is I call it "Fat is the New Black," which is basically that we pick on fat people because they are the only group now that we feel comfortable that everybody can go after and pigeonhole as being gluttons and just lacking in self-control and the energy crisis, like everything we blame on fat people right now. I'm not saying that people should be morbidly obese, but there's a point where we need to bring people dignity and understand where they're coming from. And personally, I think that most of the fat people that walk around are victims of poor information about what should be, what constitutes food even, let alone, some of the other things. Once you fix their identification of food, again, is it good or bad? Well, to me, it's like, is it food or not food? There's a lot of stuff people put in their bodies that our grandparents would not have recognized as food substances. I guess where I'm going with this is just, we, like you said, we like these straight lines, and there are no straight lines in nature. It's all, it's all meandering, and it's just, there is theoretically an end, but there's all these little branches that are going to take you, and they're going to give you experiences, and they're going to teach you new things along the way. And help you to kind of refine who you are. So, personally, one of my challenges in what I do is that I've refused to name what I do, because once I put that box around it and say, this is the, paleo, vegan, macrobiotic, whatever you want to call it, and that's the other thing is everybody wants to, and this is what I love about you. Everybody, you so tap into the fact that no matter how much vegan you can be, there's always one guy who's got to push it a little further. There's that one guy who's like, I only eat fruit. And then there's another guy who's like, I only drink liquid. And then there's another guy who says, I only breathe air. I don't even need food. So there's always this thing, about humans where we want sameness and radically different at the same time.
Yeah.
I need to wear everything just like my friends. My friends are wearing it. Why can't I wear it? I can't wear that. She's wearing that.
Absolutely. And the radically different note, and I also a note of, you mentioned you refuse to label what you do. I'm sure I'm guilty of putting a lot of labels on myself. However, I enjoy when I notice what would otherwise maybe previously have been just a blind hypnotic trance where I walk into a box without even knowing it. So when I put out videos like, meat eaters, if meat eaters acted like vegans, videos like that, I'll get a lot of messages. JP, are you a vegan? And I'll write back and say, I'm Caucasian. It's like,
well, thank you.
or they'll rate, JP, are you a Christian? I'm like, no, I'm Caucasian. Or no, I'm a human. So it's kind of like and part of that is me being a smartass, and I need to be more mature. And part of it is, I think, a place of very much maturity where I recognize a label that someone wants to understand me without understanding me. Yeah. They're like, all I want to understand is if you're a Christian. And if you are, I have this whole story ready to go that I've made up about who you are. It has nothing to do with you, but I think it does. So the idea of not consenting to making someone's life easier by allowing them to essentially delude themselves about me or anything else is important. And also at the same time, I don't want to misrepresent myself by saying, no, I'm this category, that one. So give just an absolute 90-degree category that they didn't expect. Like, this is not a vegan, I'm a human.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is a message I've been saying for years, which is that, we have, again, goes back to the first comment I believe I made, which was, that people are, many people today feel that, they're so much more enlightened that they don't believe in God anymore, but now they need something to grab onto, right? So they have turned the diet into the new religion for a lot of people, sure. So because I don't believe there was a time in history where people identified themselves as their diet.
Yeah.
That it's a really kind of creepy thing when you really start to think about it. It's like, really, you are your diet? Like, no, so people say, well, what are you? Are you primal? Are you paleo or whatever? I'm like, I try to follow the traditions of my ancestors and of what humans have eaten since the beginning of time. I know that I fall short. So how can I put a label on it when I know that, I might go out and have ultimate burger tomorrow or, just something.
Well, God forbid you do something unpredictable, Adrian, that would cause people to actually have to be present with you and observe you rather than going by the bias they learned about you last month.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very mean of you.
I know, it sucks. And, call me a bitch. What can I say?
There's something interesting. There was a book I read years ago it's called Influence by Robert Cialdini.
Yeah.
So in the book, he points out something about human psychology that seemed true when I read it, which is we have this inherent reaction of trying to avoid coming across as inconsistent.
Yes.
Meaning we impose this huge limitation where we don't let ourselves change our mind because we don't want to express ourselves as inconsistent to other people because we have this fear that we'll be judged to be unstable. And man, is there anything more unstable than becoming rigid and not allowing ourselves to change? So I while that's a part of human psychology, I think it's very much a self-preservation reaction part of our psychology. I don't think it really serves us to be under that trance of like, I have to be consistent. So the idea maybe you're eating mostly plants most of the time, and then you betray that modus operandi by going out and eating a burger. Like, that's great. But you won't fit into a predictable, consistent box in your mind or other people's minds. It means you have to create a new story about who you are. And then other people, Adrian, I don't have a reference point. Like, she's mostly vegan, but just ate a burger. So it causes people to have to be present with you and not see you through their story, but I think more see you. So yeah, spontaneity, I think it's the fountain of youth. And I think predictability is the drought that dries up the fountain of youth of spontaneity.
Right. Well, I think also when you position yourself or, you put yourself out in public as someone who can help other people with something. And yes, there's one of my pet peeves is the school in New York, IIN, Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And when they first started, I think I came across them. They were in their infancy, maybe 2-3 years in existence. And I was at the doctor's office and I opened up the magazine that their little catalog, and it says, "We will train you in any of these 300 diets that you want to, be." And apparently they've changed their way of working now. But I remember thinking, how do we intellectually override our biology and biochemistry to adapt to the cookie diet? Where do we?
Isn't that frightening?
It's very frightening, and because I come from the school of Chinese dietetics, in part, I look at diet as a very cyclical thing, and cyclical not only from birth to, in my case, menopause. but also in terms of times of year, like even here in Hawaii, we have seasons. There's, guavas are falling right now. Maybe that's the time to eat guavas. My avocados will be ready in a month. Those types of things that I know are going to be cyclical. Ahi runs down at the ocean now versus something else that runs in the summer. So I think what's missing from a lot of the conversation is that theoretically many of these diets, vegan or what have you, paleo can work, but you get to a point where you're just doing it consistently for 18, 24 months. And your body's like, well, everything else around you changed. Like, how come you're not changing? And so we need to start respecting that more, I think, is really what it is. We need to understand, again, there's no straight lines. It's really just through the grace of refrigeration we can do that kind of stuff. And freezing, right? So, maybe we need to tune in a little bit more to just being more in tune with, it's a cold day outside. I might want a beef stew for lunch today, but when it's really hot, I might just want a salad.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is interesting the day and age we live in, just to sound like some 3,000-year-old man, where we do have many options for food because of air transport and refrigeration, and I think that our minds can really screw with that. I don't think our nutrient needs are determined by our mind. I think they're determined by our body, which is incredibly integrated with our environment, the weather, where we're at in life. And I think one of the dangers is eating according to, it's kind of like eating according to the Pledge of Allegiance that we make in order to belong to a group, as well as eating according to what makes the most logical sense to us. Because I don't think the mind is powerful enough to determine our nutrient needs based on what we want to be true for us. I think if we use, kind of like Einstein said, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. If we use the servant of our mind to make kind of like more observations, like let me notice with my mind how I feel right now. Do I feel a craving towards something thick and hot? Or let me use my mind to notice how I feel after I just ate that. Does that give me hindsight information of that was pretty good for me, or is my energy low and I feel that? So again, I think our mind can help notice our nutrient needs, but I don't think it really determines our nutrient needs.
Sorry, you continue. I do have a comment about that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's, I think, one of the dangers of any book written on nutrition, which, by the way, I'm so grateful books are written on nutrition. I don't mean to sound like a book burning, like throw the nutrition books on the fire. But one of the dangers about nutrition books is most of them are written with a lot of logic and essentially rational arguments for why this philosophy is true. So that we can then convince ourselves, well, this makes a lot of sense to eat this way. But that doesn't mean that it's our way of eating right then, just because it makes sense to our mind.
Absolutely. And I got two things I got to say, and God help me if I can remember the second one after I say the first one. But the one thing, I was just talking to my friend about this morning, because through doing the podcast, I'm meeting a lot of people. A lot of people are sending me their books, and I'm reading their books, and I'm realizing that many of them who are coming down to a dietary model that looks very much like our food pyramid, they are not clinicians. They are PhDs. And they're sitting behind a desk or in the lab, and they're reviewing studies, right? So they're just reviewing stuff, and they got citation after citation after citation. And granted, yes, I know that when I help somebody and I'm working with someone, that's an anecdote. But if it gets results, that anecdote is worth mentioning. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So what's happening is that a lot of these studies, when they're saying like, goji berries have just as much protein as a pound of beef, and but what they're doing is they're taking the goji berries or the kale or whatever it is, and they're subjecting it to a highly chemicalized process that does not happen in the human body. So theoretically, yes, there's all this stuff in those foods. Can we extract it? Can our bodies actually use it in a predictable way based on those studies? And that's where, the art of being some kind of, the alternative healer, practitioner, what have you, and really learning from your patient base, your client base. That's where the art comes in. And unfortunately, what I see a lot of people basing these choices on, again, they're from studies which are in a vacuum. It's sort of like when Dick Cheney went on the canned hunt with his friend and shot him in the face.
It's like it's just about that. He shot his friend in the face. It's funny.
Well, did you see what his friend looked like? Well, they were going after birds. That's all I'm going to say. I did remember what I was going to say.
Studies.
Yeah, and it was
shooting his friend.
Yeah, Dick Cheney shooting his friend. That's what threw me off. We'll get back to it, but this is what happens to me. I have too many ideas going through my head, but
yeah, it's a good problem to have, I think.
Well, it's a lot of noise. And that's my big problem is the noise in my head constantly telling me what to do. And I think this is what a lot of us face, is that we're trying to answer the call all the time, no matter where it's coming from.
Yeah, that definitely hits a nerve for me. Like, will we make the noise in our head go away? You're like, I don't know. As maybe it gets a little quieter, sometimes louder, but do we become the servant to the voice in our head? The always got to do this, got to do that. And I know I fall into that trap sometimes, maybe more than sometimes. And it's like, when it comes to doing this, enough is never enough to satisfy the voice in my head. However, I find a little more peace when I can do my best to notice the voice and not become a slave to it.
Mm-hmm.
Easier said than done, because the voice can then sharpen its critical edge, right, to try to motivate me to obey it. And it's interesting how that can actually be a little bit of a sapper, at least for me, of the quality of life when I, essentially become the slave of my thoughts.
Right. And I did remember what I was going to say, and it had to do with something else. I just did it again to myself. Oh my God. Okay. Just breathe. So you go after, I shouldn't say go after, but you give examples in a lot of areas of our lives. You talk about selfies and organics and politics. And just the guru. I saw your Tony Robbins the other day. What about animal rights people? Do you have something on them? Because I'm seeing this a lot. This kind of, I call it the fake animal rights activist who has way too many animals than they can take care of in a loving manner. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about, and I don't have anything on animal rights activists, and I probably won't do anything on it because I don't. First off, I don't feel called to it,
right,
though there is fodder there, and at the same time, I think it would feel a little bit like a line that I wouldn't know how to dance with regard to. The last thing I'd want to ever do is come across like I'm against animals.
Exactly.
So shining a light on interesting human behavior that's harbored by people who are maybe a little obsessive about controlling animals in the name of animal rights. I apologize for the trucks driving by.
That's okay.
Like it's my fault. Like
yeah. Close the window, will ya?
So yeah, long story short, probably won't be anything on animal rights coming after me, other than just sincerely supporting animal rights causes.
Right.
Sometimes I think I like animals more than people.
There's a lot of that, and I think that's what drives a lot of people is that they're perhaps even avoiding some of their human relationships in favor of animal relationships.
Absolutely, I think I do that with my dog. I'm guilty, both hands raised.
Okay, so I do remember what I was going to say, and it had to do with the fact that I do believe we were talking about the mind overriding what our biology is. And what I do believe, actually, is that should we choose certain types of diet, particularly ones that say, deny an entire food group.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe they are possible and maybe even necessary sometimes if it matches the lifestyle. So, if somebody, if you're raw food vegan and you just, sit deep breathing all day and that's your job, basically you're a monk, then, it might work. I think certain, ways of eating can be, conducive to certain lifestyle choices. But I do believe that when we start to run into problems is where those two collide, they conflict with one another. So, you have this very demanding lifestyle. You're living in like downtown Tokyo and the lights are flashing and all this stuff and people moving, and to try and stay in that very centered, just, eating grains and berries, like it may not fly, but
I love that. And I found funny contrast came to my mind as you were mentioning, like, okay, the raw food person doing nothing but like meditating and breathing all day. So very little catabolic activity versus like a hardcore CrossFitter doing like 4 hours of CrossFit a day, top of other stuff. Like, yeah, those are very different lifestyles. To me, it's a beautiful consideration. It's kind of like, what does my body need based on what I'm doing to it and what I'm not doing to it.
Right.
I think is a very beautiful consideration. And I love your thought on the seasons as well, and your thought on the ancestors as a consideration. And I love the thought on like also not thinking about those things and going by the feel, which I think the feelings is kind of like, it almost like summarizes all those thoughts into this, I think, the most sophisticated language we can ever speak, which is the feeling language. It's not like a linguistic language, but I think it's, Carl Jung called our feelings the language of our soul. So I think it's kind of like, our soul is telling us what food is going to be soul food for us.
Right,
maybe.
right. How do you think the average person can connect with that?
I'm big on body sensations. In developing a basic relationship with our body sensations. I find that many times, most days, I'll ask people, especially during client sessions, how are you feeling? And almost always is, well, I think this. So thinking is not a feeling. Or I feel that what happened is this, and this. Well, that's an analysis. That's not a feeling. It's I get very out of touch with my feelings. And I'm not even talking about emotions. I'm talking more primal than that. Body sensations, tightness, tingling, coolness, hotness, like whatever the sensations are. I think those are the basic foundation of the intimate connection we have with our body. And I think we can all benefit by getting more in touch with that. And I think an easy way to do it is you sit down for 1 minute and notice one feeling in your body and stick with the damn thing for 1 minute. Keep breathing. In one way that we try to deflect from that feeling is by noticing all the other feelings. But when we do that, we're escaping the intimacy with that feeling. So instead of like all 1,000 feelings that are going right, yes, you have a sophisticated nervous system. Get it. It's capable of a lot. What is one feeling? Like right now, I feel tingling in my left shoulder and arm, and I just sit with that. So to me, it's training connectivity. Just like if someone wants to get strong in the gym, typically they'll enter the gym and they're nothing more than average strength at best. They might bench press, 120 pounds. But if they want to learn to bench press 300, it takes a lot of practice of strengthening. So to me, the strengthening the connection we have with ourselves takes consistency. And trying to start off in this grandiose, giant leap of, well, let me connect with a feeling of pure bliss and ecstasy. Like, holy hell, good luck at that. Unless you're on all the psychedelics within arm's reach. That's maybe a way of bypassing your humanness. But I think the truly, I say truly like it'll make it more true.
Yeah, I was going to say, you.
This makes me more self-righteous, trying to brainwash people into believing what I think. So
No,
truly,
yeah, well, it goes without saying.
Our spiritual connection is perhaps paradoxically found through the mundane doorways of our humanness, these simple things called feelings. What kind of sensations do I have in my body? So first and foremost, I think connection to body sensations is where we can make huge, huge strides. And it's funny, in our society, as I understand it, very rarely do we have an education on feelings. We have, years worth of education on logical processes, which is great. Actually, I don't know if it's great. A lot of probably controversy about that.
You're always going to piss off someone, don't you know that? Some asshole. Sorry, but it's going to come out of us when we speak spiritually. Some asshole is going to come out of the woodwork and say that you are wrong. I've got the exception to the rule.
No, it is funny. Trying not to piss people off will piss some people off too. It's like, you're being too delicate.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like we get all this left brain logical education, but no right brain feeling oriented education. I mean, granted, some of that comes when we're exposed to the arts, and even that can be pretty limited.
Or pot.
Absolutely. Or that can act, and I do believe there's a legitimate potential for connection there. And sometimes the great feeling people get when they're high comes out of a sense of euphoria, out of escaping themselves, rather than a sense of euphoria, if you will, through connecting to themselves. Is very different.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when people self-medicate, it always feels good short term. So nonetheless, I don't want to vilify or heroify pot, but I think it has potential either way. So nonetheless, for the feeling-oriented education that most of us never got, I think there's a token of self-responsibility that says nobody's going to give it to us unless we do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the beautiful thing, because we absolutely can give ourselves an education on increasing our EQ, our emotional quotient, and our feeling intelligence.
That's very uplifting. It's because I think no, seriously, I think that a lot of people get to a point where, this isn't working, because you meet the people who are really trying so hard to be spiritual, and they get the gear and they're going to the classes and they're on every retreat, but their life is a shambles, and they're and in that in and of itself kind of demonstrates that maybe we're looking at this from the wrong angle. But you give us a way to to come back to this, what is your feeling? And it's not about denying, it's actually about accepting. And like you said before, there's that life is a journey. It's not something with a definite plan laid out. You have to experience it, as opposed to channel it, so to speak.
And I think it's kind of funny, and I do think it is funny, even though I said the word funny in a not very funny way, that as you mentioned earlier about, like, in nature, nothing is straight. It's all wiggly lines. I was looking at a tree out in my backyard earlier today. There's just no straight lines on it. It's all wiggly. So I think it's funny how the life that we try to live is always neat and tidy. Essentially, our imagination creates these straight lines, black and white, senses of certainty for us to live by. However, that's an alternate reality in our imagination. And it's a beautiful imagination. Our imagination's awesome. However, our kind of connection to thyself, when we think our imagination is our reality, is questionable at best. Yet embracing nature's wisdom that says it's all wiggly lines, there's no straight lines, I think gives us more permission to live our life authentically, which means we accept it'll be messy. Things won't work out exactly the way I think they will. There will be pain at times. There will be surprises at times. There will be unexpected joy at times. There will be a loss of control at times. That's the messiness of life. It really is. And some would say that's the beauty of life. When we're missing our quality of life, I would dare say we're trying to control our life too damn much. And I think the Zen people might just tell us the only thing we really can control is our ability to surrender the need to control. So I think when we think we're in control of life, we're just really disconnected from what's really going on and pacifying ourselves with the imagination that says I'm in control.
But what you're making me think of is children. And do you have children?
I don't.
None that
I'm aware of. None that I pay child
Well, yeah, I think you, because you said something about a lot of women, right? A lot of relationships.
You do the math and
I'm like, oh, all these red-haired kids with ponytails. What's going on? But with children today, do you see that we are improving that dialogue with them, or are we sheltering them too much from that pain? Because I see a lot of the latter, but maybe I'm just not tuned in enough to the former.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm tuned in enough to have much opinion about that. I think I'm convoluted enough. I could see it for
Both sides.
Each side of it. Yet I will say something about kids, whether on the whole it's getting more embracing of sort of the beautiful messiness that is the mysteries of our life, or more like sheltered about that. I think the true nature of children, something that shines through either way. Like when I'm around my nieces and nephews, their ages, I think 4, 6, and 7, they're just messy. And they're not like abnormally messy for kids, but they've got crap on their face. And, when they get stuff, crayons and stuff out coloring on the table, like they're going to fall off the table. Some gets on the table and, there's marks on the walls because they're freaking kids. Like they walk in the house, there's maybe still some mud on their feet. And that's beautiful. But I noticed my reaction to that, like, if that was my house, I don't know. And I think what that really symbolically teaches me is, like, when I do that, like that cringe feeling when they're getting like messy or getting like ketchup on their elbows, then that's really teaching me, I think, I would say how repulsed parts of me are about letting go of control in my life, about my defense mechanism towards the wiggly lines in some areas of my life. Because it's like the ketchup on the elbow, that's literal, but what's that symbolic mirror teach me about me? It's like, okay, well, my cringe, that's not generated by the ketchup on the elbow, that's generated by my human heart. And what is it about me that my heart is feeling? And I would dare say it's my fear of losing control. I'm sure about certain elements of my life, even though I'm speaking in generalities. So anyway, I guess that turned out to be less about children and more about me, which is
fine. I mean, that's, I was going to say, no, but it is the same thing. And I definitely see that with me. My kids are probably my greatest teachers about who I am. Because it really does change your perspective on everything, and that, what is this life about? What are we here for? And it's, you kind of, they're born and you're like, what the heck? But then you're like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. I think this is not necessarily my purpose, but it reflects back to you so much of how far you've come. And then you realize, oh my gosh, like, now I see why people do this. You have a totally different appreciation for it. Messes aside, and I'm picturing the space party we had for my daughter where I made moon pies, and then we ended up having to have it indoors. So there was just chocolate on hands on walls after that. Which is the other side of trying to create this utopian childhood. And I see this a lot where, many parents, well, we don't do that. We don't spank and we don't do this. And, our kids, don't yell at my child because he, threw a dart at your child or whatever, but seriously,
you stab my child in the leg. Don't yell at my child.
Exactly. And so, are we sheltering them from pain? Are we not teaching our children is what I'm always asking. Are we just not what's going to happen to these kids? Because the kids are coming from India and, Japan or wherever, and they're getting a totally different disciplinary system. And then we complain that they take our jobs, and it's like, well, you didn't exactly raise your child to have an interest in anything or to understand disappointment is really the big one, or being given instruction and having to follow that. What's going on?
Overcoming adversity, working through pain. It's like just having the weakest immune system because your immune system's never been exposed to any kind of challenges. And that can be absolutely deadly to have a weak immune system that's never been stimulated. That's why they apparently children who are raised on farms, always dirty, hands in poop, those children have stronger immune systems because their immune system has had to overcome more challenges. There's some kind of proverb that says smooth water makes lousy sailors. And the balance. What is the balance? The utopia childhood that makes the parents comfortable, but is essentially abusive to the children because it shields them so much.
Right.
It's like we can only become as strong as we are challenged. It's a rule. Capital R. That's how our bodies get stronger, and I think our psyche is the same. Versus the other side of obviously abuse, straight up, what we call traditional abuse, though that is a deep seed, though it can take years to recover from that trauma, and it can become the greatest source of strength in that adult's life who was once the abused child, and that some never get over it. But nonetheless, without going to the other extreme of being neglectful of or abuseful of children, what is that middle ground that is appropriately unsheltering of children at the same time protecting of children? Challenges come in and nurturing is there too. I have no idea. I really don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough.
Because I have no idea, I should probably write a book about it.
Oh, there you go.
Here's what the research says.
Right.
Kids need to be fed food, so do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's when you said that, the thing about the kids eating dirt, I just interviewed someone who wrote a book about it. And again, I'm not saying that what he was saying is wrong, but he's a researcher. He's not actually working with the kids. So, again, you're looking at the data, and yes, you can draw certain conclusions, but is your rationale necessarily, for why that is? Does that always match up with the reality? Are we missing some other human element, some other thing that's going on? And he does talk about the microbiota in the soil and, these things. And I raise chickens. I keep telling everybody, I do this thing it's big on the island. It's called Korean natural farming. And it works by, propagating essentially the probiotics, the fungi that are naturally in the soil, and using those to strengthen the crops that you want to grow, because that's actually what is feeding the weeds that are outpacing your plants. But so we're moving that microbiota to the plants that we want, and and not necessarily starving the weeds, because what I love about the system, and it does feed into what we're talking about, which is that it works on an understanding that we're not trying to defeat the weeds, and that the weeds actually serve a purpose in holding water in the soil and providing shade. And so, it's a really lovely symbiotic understanding of nature where you don't rely on soil tests and, this pH this and whatever. You're understanding, yellow leaves. Well, let's see, we put a lot of nitrogen on that. Maybe it needs calcium now, or what have you. So It's I really love to use that as a mirror for a lot of other things in life, because it really does show that we don't need to eradicate one thing to become another. Sometimes
I like that.
those little reminders that we have that can fuel us and feed us more towards the direction. They're clues. They give us that insight, like, the like you talked about with the kids, like, oh, they're messy, they got ketchup on their elbow, and but you are intelligent enough to recognize that as feedback for some other element of your personality that maybe you don't recognize on a daily basis.
Oh, well, thank you for seeing that as an intelligent aspect of me.
Well,
I do appreciate that.
No, but seriously, you're aware. Like, you're clearly aware of yourself, and many people will look at that and they'll be like, "It's those kids, damn it, those meddling kids." But you take it a step further, which I think a lot of us are not able to, especially when we're in the situation. We're not able to see that as a reflection of not necessarily something we need to change, but just something that is a part of us. Right?
Yeah.
Now, you have a background as a Czech practitioner?
I do. And also at the same time, Adrian, probably a graceful part of this discussion. In just a second, I will have to hop off. I've got a client appointment at the top of the hour.
Yes.
But yeah, background as a Czech practitioner, I started studying with the Czech Institute when I was 20 years old. No, I'm sorry, 18.
Wow.
Maybe 19, but right about there. And and then went through their programs, and then I taught for the Czech Institute for 7 years up until 2013.
And do you still use that in your work, or are you focused solely on the spiritual side?
Yeah, focused solely on the spiritual / emotional side, which I think is the same thing, just two different words. But yeah, the work as far as helping people with exercise and nutrition through the Czech practitioner stuff is beautiful stuff. I very much value it. However, it's, it was necessary gluten-free breadcrumb on my trail to get me where I'm supposed to be, at least right now anyway. Yeah, so it doesn't, the passions of my heart isn't really fueled by that type of work anymore, though it once was.
Right. Actually, that brings me to a question from one of our followers, Julia Stuber, and she wants to know that she said that it was mentioned in some of the celiac groups that you are gluten intolerant.
Yeah.
People were divided if it was funny or not. She thought it was hilarious. And she is gluten intolerant. She's celiac. So you're celiac, gluten intolerant. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, right in the middle. So I'm gluten intolerant. I've been probably gluten intolerant my whole life, but I've been gluten free for about 14 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you decided to poke fun at, I'll let you go, but when you decided to kind of poke fun at some of the dialogue around that and the mantras, let's say, that people use, and you're not poking fun at people who are gluten intolerant. You're poking, my understanding is you're poking fun at the people who want to be gluten intolerant, the people who are like, I feel left out of the party. Come on.
I would almost say my intention was neither.
Okay.
It's shining a light on behavior that both want to be, like, I want to be intolerant so I can be trendy too, as well as some people who are like just super intolerant, and it's like their health is significantly better when they avoid gluten, yet they can still have common behavior. What we were talking about earlier with, self-righteous behavior that actually creates separation between them and other people, as opposed to being a person who doesn't eat gluten. And if someone doesn't provide for us according to our rigid standards, then we don't need to string them up into the guillotine. We don't have to separate ourselves from other people. We don't have to have these, what I would call almost, expectations from the mind of a child that says the world should cater to me. So I do think, so the behaviors I was portraying, I think, are how we can bleed out our self-responsibility, which I think is ultimately disempowering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because as I mentioned this joker earlier, she comes over to my house all the time, and she's like, "Well, I'm gluten free, and I'm lactose intolerant, and I'm vegan, and I'm doing this and that." And she always expects everyone to provide for her. But damn it, if I had a birthday party here over the weekend and somebody brought a baguette and cheese and she was chowing down on it, I'm like, stop telling people that, to provide for you if you cannot provide for yourself. But both Julia and one other follower, Mike Gisandi, they want to know, how do you keep a straight face? How do you stay in character?
To sound like a cliche artist, it's like being true to the art. It's like when I'm saying things in character, they're amusing to me, but they're not funny to me. And I'm guessing the reason why they're not funny to me while I'm saying them is because like I'm just really connected to the message rather than, really observing it. So it's like, yes, I'm amused. So there's some observance, but it's like more I'm being the character. So I'm not really able to see the hilarity of it, if there is hilarity in it. There's a convoluted answer for you.
Well, I think I understand. I took an acting class once, and it was the gist of it was acting through reacting. So, as opposed to going up there with your script and maybe more of an improv type thing, it's really, okay, what happens and what would this character do in that situation? And I think it removes for you, at least temporarily, that analysis of whether or not it's going to be funny. It's just, this is the mindset of the character. So you just understand your character well, I would think.
Yeah, it's like, absolutely. It might be funny to other people, but it's not funny to the character.
Right, exactly. And and any comedy, I would think, to some extent, is not really, nobody wants to see someone laugh at their own jokes, right? So, they're taking it seriously, and that's often what makes it so funny.
Yeah, amen to that.
So, in any case, I know you have to go. I know you've got people waiting for you, and you could charge thousands and thousands of dollars for what you do, but you're actually really reasonable. I was looking on your website and I was like, why is he not like the gurus charging $6,000 for 2 sessions? What's going on?
Yeah, maybe I'm just not enlightened enough. But to me, it's important to stay accessible to people who don't just own private jets.
Yes, exactly. Well, I've got a whole system for you, and it only costs you $2,000, and I can show you how to rape people for all the money that they have and still service the little people.
Yeah, well, it sounds very giving. Boy, Adrian, it has been absolutely beautiful talking with you.
Same
to me,
here.
You are wonderful. And I can't thank you enough for having me on your show, sister.
Thank you so much. And we're going to have you down to the Big Island, and then you come to my studio, and we'll do something else. Or, if you do a retreat or something down here, I'd love to connect with you and have you over.
I would love for the stars to align for that. That would be
awesome. Awesome. It's not as expensive as you think. Okay, so this has been JP Sears from awakenwithjp.com. You can find him on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Awaken with JP. Thank you so much for being our guest heretic for the week, and we will hopefully see you around. And let us know when your book is coming out soon, right?
Yeah, it's available for pre-order now on Amazon. How to Be Ultra Spiritual. Official release is into 2017. So, but yeah, it's available now if people want me to manipulate them into buying it right now.
Okay, we'll just stare him down with those beautiful blue eyes. Thank you so much for being so gracious with your time, and have a fantastic day and happy Halloween.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks.
The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nikola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean, and our operations manager is Linda Hansen. I'm your host, Adrian Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter @NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you just want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. Thanks.